Welcome to the FDN Thrive podcast. We interview leaders in the functional health space who bring you the most up-to-date, cutting-edge information for people who have tried it all for their health issues. We hope you enjoy the show.
When I started running these labs on myself, I remember getting my stress and hormone panel back where you're measuring your steroid hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol. And my husband and I were on our way down south to a dinner and I got my results back and I was looking over them in the car and I just started crying. And I thought, it's not in my head. I've got no hormones. I had no hormones, no estrogen, no progesterone.
Hey there, folks, and welcome back to another episode of the FDN Thrive podcast. My name is Evan Transu, aka Health Coach Ev, and I will be your host for today's show. What are we at now? Like episode 6 or 7? Honestly, I can't believe they keep letting me back. I think they just haven't found anyone better to do it yet, but I'm really happy to be here for the time being, and hopefully they don't kick me out anytime soon. I'm just kidding, of course. I think I'm funny, but that's why I had to do podcasting. No one would pay me for stand-up comedy, so I get to throw in my jokes here, and you still have to listen. But, I don't want you to click off the podcast, so I better get to the actual information, right? We are going to be interviewing someone super special today in FDN. She has some major roles here and definitely wears a lot of hats and does a ton of stuff behind the scenes to make this organization work and be able to do the amazing things that it's able to do. Her name's Jennifer Woodward, and she is a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, as well as a board-certified functional wellness coach, currently pursuing her master's degree in integrative nutrition. She works with women all over the world to help them soothe their digestive woes, speed up their metabolisms, and stabilize their hormone imbalances. She is also the executive director of the Association of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Practitioners and loves getting to help new FDNs thrive professionally. She was recently a quarter-long guest lecturer in graduate endocrinology at Parker University. This year, her free time is well spent homeschooling her 4 children, but when she can sneak out, she loves to play ultimate frisbee or walk with her dog, Baxter. Now, I had the privilege of getting to do one interview before for a separate thing with Jennifer, but today, I don't know what happened or what it was. We were just on fire. We had some good chemistry here. We're talking about hormones. We're talking about women's periods, things that, the average person probably doesn't think is so cool. But it lit us up, and if it lights you up, well, welcome. You are definitely a part of our tribe. So without further ado, let's get to the interview. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, Ev, thanks for having me.
No problem. So this is fun because Jennifer and I actually work together, and we will be talking more about that as we dive a little deeper into this podcast and how Jennifer got into FDN and the roles that she has now. But first and foremost, Jennifer, the thing that we've been starting out with all of our practitioners and staff members at FDN is like, how was it, or what was it like to deal with health issues yourself? Because most of us got into this work by having our own health stories. So assuming that's true for you, which I'm pretty sure it is, tell us about that. Like, when is the first time that Jennifer Woodward got a health symptom, really?
That's awesome. Yeah. I think a lot of people find FDN at the end of their rope. And so I am very much like everyone else. Health symptom wise, it was really after the birth of my 3rd son. And sometimes I blame myself because I thought, okay, I've had 2 kids, get this baby out of me. I made my doctor break my water so I could go about 10 days early. And my 3rd kid was definitely my sickest child. I also think that him coming too early contributed to some major hormonal and neurotransmitter dysfunction in my body. So after the birth of my 3rd son, Roman, I began to experience these really devastating panic attacks. I had a 9-month bout of insomnia that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I remember just even passing by the door to get to my bedroom would start to initiate a panic attack because I think, I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm not going to sleep tonight. How am I going to take care of my family? How am I going to get anything done? And so really, I feel like it was the insomnia and the panic attacks that was the most crippling. But that, just depletion of my body led to a myriad of other problems. My periods, when they finally came back, were super irregular, really heavy clotting. My hormones were a mess. I cried all the time. I just felt incapable of handling life. And now I realize I was probably suffering from some postpartum depression. I was trying to exercise too much to, lose weight after having a baby. And I felt anxious all the time. So I just couldn't get to that point in my physical fitness that I wanted to get to. I was increasingly suffering from food intolerances and sensitivities. I remember telling my husband, it feels like I can't eat anything. Like I'm allergic to everything. My stomach was bloated every day around 3 o'clock. I remember having to get into my yoga pants no matter what. Like I just couldn't button my jeans every day around 3 o'clock, which is super embarrassing. And I had some other digestive disorders. We don't have to go into all of that nitty gritty here, but suffice it to say, it was not fun. And really then just, my energy, my concentration, brain fog. At the time, the only thing that popped up were some markers for Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but doctors didn't know what to do about it. So I was offered the birth control pill. I was offered antidepressants, and I was offered Xanax. And I thought, I am 29 years old. I don't want to be dependent on these drugs the rest of my life. There's no way that that's the answer to my problems. And so I went from traditional doctors to a naturopathic doctor to what my husband calls a witch doctor, but she was a muscle testing specialist who was a chiropractor. And I saw my OBGYN. And none of those practitioners could give me any help or any really light at the end of my tunnel. And so one day I was watching a YouTube video with an FDN that was in 2015. And I heard her talking about metabolic chaos and root cause dysfunction. And she was talking about hormones and all the things that she was talking about. I was starting to almost like tremble. I'm like, how does she know me? She can't even see me.
Right,
And I thought that's it. Like I got to do that. I have got to do that. And so that became the start of my journey to becoming an FDN myself. And through FDN principles and practices, I was thankfully able to reverse every single one of those issues and more that I uncovered after working the labs on myself.
That is so cool. I just interviewed a doctor the other day, and she said this with so much conviction. 49-year-old woman that had done it for herself. She said, "At this point in my career, I do not believe that there is any disease that is not reversible." And that is a powerful statement coming. This is a traditional doctor, by the way, folks. This is OBGYN delivering 30 babies a month at one point, coming out and saying that. So to hear this over and over again, and I believe it, is very inspiring. Now, one of the things here, I definitely want to talk more about the FDN journey and those types of things, but I've been having fun with the practitioners, and we've been honing in on maybe like 1 or 2 points just because I think it's fun for people to get some useful info. What you just described, although everyone's health journey is completely unique, there is something very similar to what you just said, to what I hear with a bunch of people. And that is these issues after a pregnancy, maybe not the third, it could be the first. And I was actually going to bring up the Hashimoto's thing before you even said that, because I hear people getting diagnosed with Hashimoto's so often after pregnancy. I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to talk on that because you are like a hormone guru. What is going on that so many women are doing the most natural thing they could possibly be doing and then getting sick afterwards? Because I don't think that's how it's supposed to be.
You are so right, Ev. That is not the way it's supposed to be. So I look at it from this standpoint. When I work with private clients, I have an ancestral perspective, not only on diet, but really lifestyle. And when you think about it, we were created to be in community. Our whole life, we've always lived as humans in community. And only recently have women increasingly become kind of individualized. So we're not living with other women. We're not, living with our moms and grandmas and aunties. There's no one really to help women anymore. And men probably feel the same way, but I'm a girl, not a dude. So I identify with women. You lose your social structure a lot of times. Like I went from the workforce. I had a fantastic job that I loved, selling pharmaceuticals. I came home to the isolation of a house with just myself and my baby. And I thought, who am I that they let me walk out of the hospital with this kid? I'm not qualified to keep a human alive. It's terrifying. And then there's, sleepless nights. There's, when you don't sleep, when you're sleeping 4 hours a night, you just want Oreos. You don't want to go make yourself a really healthy salad or, make a tri-tip, right? So you're not eating well. You're not sleeping well. You're probably burning the candle at both ends in other ways too. For a lot of women, especially with my clients, we're also under pressure to get our bodies back right away. And so I was exercising twice a day right after all my babies and thinking, that was the way to being fit once again. So now I've got pressure that I'm putting on my body, from an internal and external perspective, not eating great food, probably developing some digestive issues at the time, and losing my social structure. So all of those things together, we know now, autoimmune disease has its genesis in stress. And so there are many reasons why a woman's body and brain, and really spirit, I'd argue, are kind of under attack after childbirth, be it 1, 2, or 10 children. But I think it's really like the amalgamation of all those factors coming together at the same time to where autoimmune disease starts to present itself. And knowing what we know now, that 95 of us have been exposed to viruses like the Epstein-Barr virus, which loves to lodge in thyroids. That virus is just kind of waiting for this opportunity to come out. And according to one theory of Hashimoto's thyroiditis genesis, it's that Epstein-Barr virus is hiding in the thyroid. And when your body temperature is low because you are over exercising, under eating, and under sleeping, and when your immune system's down because of all those same reasons, the condition's right for a virus to come out and maybe start attacking your thyroid gland. So that's one of the reasons I believe that women experience Hashimoto's thyroiditis after having children. But I know that, autoimmune disease runs the spectrum, and I see a lot of other autoimmune diseases start to pop up after women have gone through pregnancy and childbirth.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, Hashimoto's is that the second most common autoimmune disease after celiacs, or is it the first? Do you know offhand?
I don't know offhand, but I'm sure that
Okay.
they're
It's
hand
a
in
lot.
hand. Yeah.
So two things with what you said. One, because I think this is just, again, our audience is also here to learn, and I think they like these little tidbit facts. I just read recently, because I'm a total nut for light. I love studying light and its effect
Yeah.
on the bodies. And they exposed lab rats, to 1 hour of artificial LED lights from a screen. And at night they did this. And they found that those rats actually would start, first of all, they had issues with glucose tolerance immediately
Mhm.
after that hour. And they would choose sugar water rather than their normal food. And like literally they compared it to rats that did not get exposed to that, and those rats that got exposed to the light because of those glucose issues
Mhm.
started craving the sugar more. So when you talk about this Oreo thing, like, this is a joke that's not a joke, because it absolutely happens to everyone, and people are like, why? Well, of course, the sleep factor we know causes blood sugar issues. But when
Mhm.
we're not sleeping in modern world, we're not hanging out in the dark in our cave or in a field or something like that. We're
Right.
on our phones, we're on the computers, or we have the TV on or something. So it is a double whammy coming at us, causing those cravings. So I'm not justifying eating the Oreos, anyone, but I'm just letting you know there is science actually showing why you're encouraged to do this. Now, the other thing I wanted to say is, because your explanation was great, and I kind of had a theory about this before, and it's like, we know as FDN practitioners, sometimes, not often, but sometimes people are coming back so poorly on the hormonal tests. I actually had this myself, that we do recommend, hey, let's keep the exercise light to like minimal for a little bit, just for a little bit. Maybe you got to do walking instead. You want to stay
Mhm.
physically active, but let's cut out the high intensity interval training, right?
Mhm.
So that is a normal stress. It's a good stress that should be a healthy thing. And when we're under this barrage of different stressors, we can't do that. Now, pregnancy, I look at that as the same thing. This is a very stressful event on the body, but it should be this beautiful, natural thing that we can handle. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to simplify this for the listeners. Is it fair to say that one of the reasons then, based on what you said, that pregnancy is causing these issues is because it's almost like a final straw in this huge cascade of stress that we were already in?
Yeah, it certainly can be, especially today, like in this modern world. For a long time, it was probably, like you said, more of like a natural and beautiful thing. But when you think about it, and I'll come back again to the fact that women are under pressure you gain only 15 pounds when you're pregnant, and you have to keep up, your duties at work and your duties at home. And it's a lot of pressure for a woman who feels like she's living life all by herself. And so it can absolutely become a huge stress on the body. And a lot of women today, don't come to pregnancy from a healthy standpoint. I know I didn't. I wasn't eating correctly. I did not eat enough protein at all. I was living a lot on, complex carbohydrates, but I thought, a plant-based diet was more of a healthy way to go. And knowing what I know now, I definitely would have changed that earlier in my life because I didn't have the building blocks to come into pregnancy from a healthy standpoint. I think that's a huge stressor on the body. Already, I was experiencing some blood sugar dysregulation. My mom's a type 1 diabetic and has been since she was 4 years old. And so, pancreatic issues and blood sugar dysregulation issues do tend to run in my family. It just wasn't something I had identified then. But I see that in a lot of my own clients where their body comes to pregnancy depleted instead of nourished and fulfilled. And I really had this turn on its head when I read Weston A. Price's Nutrition and Physical
Yes.
Regeneration,
Oh,
right? Yes. And all the FDNs say amen, right?
yeah.
But just knowing, how important it was for traditional cultures to separate and segregate their women and their young men of childbearing age and making sure that they had all of the choice cuts of meat and all of the organ meats and rest and the very best care, knowing that they're responsible for the propagation of the species. Like that's a very important job. And when you come into it, on your last leg, like a lot of women do, you're absolutely right, Ev. It becomes like the penultimate stress for women's bodies.
Right. And for those that don't know, very quickly, Weston A. Price was a dentist turned nutritional researcher back in the early 1900s. He was actually on a mission to prove veganism. But thankfully, as you know, Jennifer, this was back in the 1900s. So when people were wrong, they actually shared that information rather than just changing it to fit their narrative. I mean, what a concept, right? So he actually came back after he studied these tribes and he found, because remember, he's a dentist, these people had perfect teeth. They
Mhm.
were living healthy lives. They didn't have access to modern medicine at the time, and they had better jaws than American kids. Like what was going on? And he actually found these people were not all only eating meat. There was one tribe that wasn't, but they were still eating raw animal products. But every other tribe around the world was eating raw animal products like liver, heart, intestine. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff. I
Mhm.
won't go into it too much more in depth, but I didn't want people to be left out of the loop there. I mean, this is
Good.
really fascinating and almost counterintuitive research.
Mhm.
So before we get into your FDN journey, I'm just curious because you said that you were eating plant-based complex carbohydrates. Is the natural thing like is that something that you knew about before? Like what was your career before FDN?
Yeah, I sold pharmaceuticals for Abbott Laboratories, so I was actually in the medical space and did really well over there. It part of that woke up my desire to learn more about the body because when you're a pharmaceutical rep, you have to know whatever part of the body you're selling a drug for, and then some. So, going to training for 3 months and just being immersed in medical jargon, technology, and biochemistry was super fascinating for me. And so on that side, I really liked the kind of the nerdiness of it. But just from like a developmental standpoint, my mom was very much into nutrition because as I mentioned, she suffered from type 1 diabetes ever since she was 4 years old. And so food was a huge thing in our house, be it for better or for worse. But she was always talking about how this food impacted her blood sugar, how this food impacted her diabetes or her energy. So I was able to pick up even from a very young age that food influenced mood and function of bodies. So it's just always something I've been very interested in.
Very cool. Okay, just wondering. And I didn't know that about you. I swear to God, guys, that's new information to me that Jennifer was in the pharmaceutical industry. So I find that very interesting. And I will leave it at that. So you get into FDN,
Mhm.
and something that our audience probably knows by now is that we like to use some foundational labs. And when you're going through the course, even as a practitioner, we are running these labs on ourselves just so we truly know how to work with people later, like in the FDN Thrive program. Now, I'm always curious. I mean, when you went through this, what were you finding just, maybe off the top of your head? Like what was on the labs that you were like, wow, I didn't even know about this, or I had no idea I was dealing with this? Like, what are some of those hidden stressors?
That question gives me shivers because it was life-changing for sure. So I came into this thinking I'm healthy, like I'm at a weight I want to be at. I can get through my day. I eat all the best foods. I didn't really know what that was at the time, but in my mind, I thought I was the healthiest person I knew. When I started running these labs on myself, I remember getting my stress and hormone panel back where you're measuring your steroid hormones, so estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol. And my husband and I were on our way down south to a dinner, and I got my results back and I was looking over them in the car and I just started crying. And I thought, it's not in my head. I've got no hormones. I had no hormones, no estrogen, no progesterone. When I say no, it's tongue in cheek, but the levels were so low, they were under the spectrum of what is low on the test. And so all this that I'd been doing to my body, I realized had just been depleting my body further. And so that was a really big turning point for me in how I think about health from a mental and emotional standpoint. And at that point, I was focused on building my body back up, because seeing that data right in front of you is really life changing. Once I, worked through some of those hormonal issues, I remember running the second lab on myself, which was at the time the BioHealth 401H, which is a stool test where you're looking for, intestinal bacterial overgrowth, parasites. And I, I had told you I, couldn't button my pants most afternoons, and I had been homeschooling my 4 children at the time. So we were at some homeschool like class or meeting or something. And again, I got my results while I'm sitting there trying not to let everybody know that I'm not paying attention to class because I'm reading through this health test result. And I had a parasite. And I thought, holy crap, this is why I can't button my pants. There is a little critter living inside my intestines. So I just felt like it was such like an answer to a question that I didn't even know I had. I just thought it was normal to deal with all of those symptoms and just feel awful most of the time. But seeing it there on paper that no, there's something that, shouldn't be in your body that's in your body, but we can do something to get rid of it was very empowering. I loved it. So those are the 2 labs that really changed a lot for me.
I think your description of what you felt with the lab test results is even just as powerful as the results themselves. I have a wonderful acupuncturist out here where I live, and we always have, very objective conversations. And he's, wondering sometimes because he's big on mindset. He's like, do running labs like actually help people? He's like, don't you think it would scare them sometimes to see stuff on the labs? And I'm just like, because I think he's correct in certain circumstances, but I'm like, you must not be talking to the people I'm talking to. And you're not talking to the people that we're working with here, because we always talk about, being stuck in the cycle of trial and error. The people like us, the people that are listening to this right now, have been in this for so long, probably way longer than they should, at least, trying to figure out what's going on. And no, when I saw my stuff on paperwork, I wouldn't say I was particularly scared. I was like, all right, like this is what's going on. It's validating, empowering was the word you used. And now I have something to actually work on. So I know, again, total hormone guru, you are. So I always like to focus in on one thing on the lab test so the listener can take away some little nuggets of info. Now let's go back to the stress panel. I will leave it up to you. Take a second and think about like one marker on there that was maybe particularly interesting to you. And then can you share that with the audience, like maybe what it means, what the relevance of it is, because most people don't know a dang thing about hormones. I went through FDN, and I still have plenty to learn myself, right? Even though we learn an extensive amount.
Yeah. No, I'm always learning too. And I just am fascinated by the endocrine system and the world of hormones. So that's a fun question for me. At the time, I had no knowledge of this hormone, but the more research I did on it, the more important it became to me. And I tell my clients now, if you had to ask me what was my favorite hormone, I would say progesterone. So that was the marker on the test where I had very, very little. Again, I was under the low range of that reference range with progesterone. And the more research I did on progesterone, I realized, progesterone is a hormone that helps your body feel calm. Progesterone is a hormone that helps your body sleep. And so, that anxiety and the insomnia that I was suffering after the birth of my 3rd child, I realized was due to that, depleted level of progesterone in my body. Now, something I didn't share, but before the birth of my 3rd child, I had suffered a miscarriage that was just a confusing and grief-filled time in our lives. But progesterone progesterone is needed to create a healthy baby. Actually, progesterone is shortened from the phrase progestation hormone, which I tell my clients means like for a baby. And so if you're having trouble, with infertility or recurrent miscarriages, progesterone is a great hormone for you and your practitioner to look at. And so it's one of the first things I look at in my own clients too, especially if they're struggling with some of those symptoms that I was struggling with. Progesterone is also to be built in the body needs sufficient amounts of vitamin B6. And so that was something I was very deficient in as well. Not eating enough animal products, I wasn't getting those B vitamins into my body. And when you don't have enough B6, not only can you not make progesterone, but it really starts to mess with your neurotransmitters like your serotonin and your dopamine. So there I had some answers too as to why I was pounding the Oreos every night. I needed that dopamine hit, and why I was crying all the time. I had low levels of B6 and therefore allopregnanolone, which is associated with progesterone as well. And progesterone is the end game. And so there was very little joy in my life because my brain it didn't have the raw materials to create that happiness hormone, serotonin. So, I know there are, more powerful hormones like thyroid hormone, but at the end of the day, progesterone is my favorite hormone, and for good reason.
Awesome. And I kind of almost intuitively knew you were going to bring that up for some reason. Seriously, because progesterone is, I only learned recently. I mean, it sounds like common sense to a practitioner now, but I never thought about it as progestation. I'm like, wow, that's a great way to put it for people so they understand the importance. And one of the things that we see as FDNs, I think, especially, I mean, I'm sure it's even worse in, 35, 40-year-old women, but I'm talking to 25-year-old women sometimes, and their progesterone is tanked. And I'm like, wow. And, I'm really proud of them because they're trying to be proactive because they're worried about like infertility and not being able to have kids. And certainly we don't diagnose anything here, but I know for a fact when that's tanked, on day 19 of their cycle, that's not going to be looking so good for having kids. So I'm very glad that that's your favorite hormone. And you know what? Just the fact that you have a favorite hormone. I mean, guys, listen, we might not be the most fun people to hang out with, but these are the people you want to work with. If you got a favorite hormone, I would trust this woman with your stuff. So that's pretty cool. Now, when you're going through this healing journey with FDN, I know that it can be a long, long time before we get to where we want to be, but typically there are some like quick wins. And at the very least, I know we win quickly enough that we're inspired to keep going. So, what were some of the first major changes that you saw, and roughly how long did they take to achieve?
Oh, yeah. So figuring out that hormone panel was definitely instrumental, like I said. So addressing my low cortisol, and cortisol, is a stress hormone, but it's also helps you with your immunity. It helps you with your energy. And so to have depleted levels of cortisol meant I had little immunity and little energy. And so getting those cortisol levels back up through use of some supplements and through a really, really nourishing diet high in animal products changed a lot for me. Making sure that my cortisol levels, which were actually slightly elevated right before bedtime, it's not a good thing because it prevents you from getting to sleep. And so working on my cortisol levels during the day and then right before bed was very helpful because I was able to start sleeping through the night. And Ev, that was huge, like huge for anyone, but especially, a mom with little babies, when you can finally sleep, it just feels like a miracle. That was definitely my biggest win. And then, as I said, with that parasite, I remember within the first, I think probably 60 days of starting to address it with the parasite protocol, I was wearing jeans at 3 p.m. and it felt fantastic.
Nice. This is awesome. And I'm getting better and better at this, because I'm always talking about the complicated stuff, and clearly you enjoy that as well. But we need to start focusing on the things people actually want. They don't care about the parasite. They want to fit in their jeans at 3 p.m. I'm tired of telling people to go out in the sun. I'm like, you want to get tan? I'm telling you to go get tan. That's how you got to word these things. So
Right.
I think that I'm joking, but I think that is important to relate to people, that, hey, this is worth addressing these things because it will lead to those results that you want. One of the coolest things about going through as a practitioner, and people that are going through as, clients in the FDN Thrive program, it's a little different, but, they'll appreciate these stories. we go through for ourselves. We are like health detectives, health nerds. This is our passion. It's our livelihood. But unfortunately, health issues are not just limited to people that have these interests that we do. Some of these people are accountants and they just want to feel better, right? So I think it's really important for those out there to understand you don't have to be able to rattle off the stuff that Jennifer's rattling off today to get results. So Jennifer, I'd like to know in your practice, because I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while, what is maybe one story, and obviously you don't have to mention names if that's not appropriate, but just like maybe the health complaints that the person was coming to you with, and then some maybe amazing results that they got. Like, I don't know, maybe they've been trying everything, nothing was working. They come to you and things just completely turned around.
Yeah. Oh, those are definitely the best stories. So I do focus on women's health and hormones, specifically periods in my practice. So I have two stories that were really kind of life changing. I had a young girl who came to me who had anorexia. I don't work with anorexics. She was in concurrent therapy, which of course I would always recommend, but she was wanting to get pregnant and she had such severe food issues and her body was so depleted and broken down. She wasn't having a period. So our only job together was to reestablish nourishment so that her body would feel safe enough to have a period. And there was a lot. This was one of my first clients. And I remember crying sometimes after sessions because it was so painful to walk through that with her. But after 6 months, her period was restored. And 2 months after that, she was pregnant with her first baby. And I just saw this little baby, Judah, who's about 2 years old, last week. And he is just precious. And she's actually pregnant again. So that was just a fantastic and very exciting story because of course you get what you want, but you also gain what we call body literacy. And so she didn't have to worry about trying to reestablish her period after her first child. She knew everything to do, how to nourish her body so that if she wanted to get pregnant again, she could. And that is just like, that drives me, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then I've got one other client. She is just fantastic too. She came and said, I feel like I'm a 30-year-old in a grandma's body. She said, I feel postmenopausal. I'm exhausted. My periods are awful. I snap at my kids all the time. I have no energy to get out of bed. When I do have a period, I'm having hot flashes. I feel like I'm getting the flu before every single period. And I have clots the size of my fist. I know that's a lot of information, but for a lot of women, they're struggling with those very things. She, of course, wanted to lose some weight as well. She wanted to figure out, how she could take care of her body so she could take care of her kids better. And within 4 months, she's actually one of my testimonials, video testimonials I have. So you can see her story, Randy, on my YouTube channel, but her periods are perfect. She doesn't even know that they're coming, which is huge for a lot of women because they get blindsided, with PMS and just all the ill effects of a mismanaged period. She said her mood is even. She knows what foods to eat now to help her body sleep because that was huge too. She doesn't have hot flashes at all anymore. And she said that was the main thing that made her feel menopausal. She was having these, extraordinary hot flashes up to 5 times a day as a 30-year-old woman. That just shouldn't happen. And she said her blood clots have become non-existent. So, there's so many things, right, that can really, really derail your day that she was complaining about, and with what we do at FDN, where we apply the dress protocol, run the labs, get your body back to balance instead of in metabolic chaos, all of those symptoms that are seemingly unrelated can come back into balance and lives can be changed. It's so cool.
This is the kind of stuff, I mean, it gives me chills, and I feel like I say that pretty often, but I don't say that unless it actually happens to me and I really experience it. I mean, you're not talking about just stuff that, like, I was someone who had terrible skin issues, right? And I'm not downplaying that. Yes, it is terrible to deal with severe cystic acne and have to walk around. But the stuff that you're talking about, pregnancy, or healthy pregnancies rather, right? And like something as simple as the second person coming home and snapping at their kids, and you look at the course correct and the change in the relationship that probably happened once this person got healthier. I always think about that as someone who unfortunately was a very angry person most of my life, right? It's not that we shouldn't take responsibility for our emotions and stuff, but I'll tell you this, it's a lot easier to do that when you don't even have those negative emotions for no reason to begin with. It feels a lot better and those relationships are stronger. I mean, it concerns me when we see, not to go off on a side topic, but the divorce rate and all these things that are happening. I'm like, is this sometimes because people just aren't healthy and our brains
Mhm.
aren't working well. And, we do snap at our family members for very silly things and we get frustrated consistently for maybe no reason at all. So this is life-changing stuff. I think this is so cool. And the best part about what we do is Jennifer's not out here treating anything specifically. You didn't say, let's have a baby or, let's not snap at your kids or get rid of these blood clots. We address everything non-specifically, right? And when the body operates well, this is what it does. This is the stuff we do at FDN Thrive. It's the stuff that Jennifer does. I mean, it's amazing. And one other quick thing on that, I have heard you say before, and because I cannot say this, I am a male, so I'm going to be smart about it. You, as a female, believe that women actually shouldn't be having a ton of pain and discomfort around their periods, right? Like you believe it is achievable to actually feel pretty good and pretty normal when you're experiencing that. Is that correct?
100%. This is what I say a lot. We're promised pain in childbirth, but we are not promised pain in periods. So you do not have to have an awful period. And my clients will come to me after 2 or 3 months and say, what I just said to you, my period snuck up on me. I didn't even know it was going to start. I was in an inopportune spot to have my period start. Normally, it'd be a week before, it'd just be leading up to this, awful event. But with the right principles in place, I would just say, I'm 38. Am I 38? I'm 38. And I have to say, like, I don't notice my periods. I mean, they're a minor inconvenience, but there's no pain, there's no cramping, there's very mild PMS sometimes, but that's my husband's fault, not mine. There's no food cravings, no pain in ovulation. I don't get tired. My legs aren't achy anymore. All the things that I used to experience, migraines, they've just fallen by the wayside because my body has the balance and nourishment it needs to do its job, which is, to have a period.
This makes so much sense too, because, one of the things I always asked, and I had almost an intuitive feeling, I'm like, I'm not supposed to be sick. This doesn't add up. I'm being told, I remember I was in my science class. I'm being told I have the best genetics and that's how I got to where I am today. Like we won, we made it out of the woods and now we're here. And
Mhm.
I got all this advanced medicine. I'm a 16-year-old guy and I feel like hell. It doesn't add up. So I think it makes a lot of sense that, women shouldn't be in so much pain and so miserable for several days when they're experiencing that. And I think that's so hopeful to know that once we get healthier and we learn the right things to do, because obviously it's not their fault, that we can course correct and start achieving those types of results. So
Yeah.
I have 2 more quick things for you, Jennifer.
Sure.
Number one is if someone is listening to you, I mean, you got great energy. They're like, whoa, I need to work with this woman. I need to talk to her. Where can they find you personally?
Yeah, my website is jenniferwoodwardnutrition.com, and I'm on Instagram as Jennifer Woodward Nutrition. I'm on Facebook as Jennifer Woodward Nutrition. I'm super available. I answer emails, I answer questions on my website. So if you have anything that you want answered regarding periods or hormones, please reach out. I'd love it.
Fantastic. And then I have my signature question for
Oh
you.
no.
Now, I no, it's all good. It's all good. I always have to put my disclaimer on this because as FDNs, a good and bad thing is we do think a little too in depth sometimes about these things. So everyone's like, well, but or okay, but yeah, just work with me here. If you could only change one thing in this world, like Jennifer Woodward is ruler for the day, and you get to change the world in such a way that everyone has to do one thing for their health or maybe not do one thing, what would that one thing be?
Ooh, definitely eat animal products. Eat well-raised, pastured, to the best of your ability, animal products, especially women. And if you're a woman and you have a daughter, I would implore you, please have your daughters eat meat as well. It really is the foundation for excellent health for women. And if you're not able to digest them, then we've got another issue to talk about. But a healthy woman should be able to eat and digest meat 1 to 3 times a day.
Oh, you just hit such a sweet point too. I mean, we'll save this for another time, but I love what you just said about digestion because that's the biggest thing I hear from people is I can't digest meat. And
Right.
what they don't realize is meat should actually be one of the most easily digestible foods. There's no anti-nutrients, there's no oxalates, there's nothing like that in meat. Right?
Yeah.
It's literally just the meat itself. The defense of the animal was running, right? Or fighting. It already, I heard, I'm quoting another doctor right now. I heard them describe this before. While the plants, they still have defense mechanisms in them when we consume them. So it usually says a lot more about our bodies than the meat itself. And I've loved these little questions at the end. I thought I was going to get a lot of similar answers with FDNs. We're having a ton of diversity. So thank you very much for that. I think that's a very useful thing for people. And I hope they know, because sometimes we get kind of very sensitive about that topic.
Sure.
I get it. Jennifer and I don't think are going out hunting and making that a recreational activity, but I can't deny I came into FDN as an organic vegetarian for a couple of years. It didn't work for me. It didn't work. And especially once I started implementing the organ meats, like I'm sure that's something that you would probably recommend as well. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely.
I want to finish up our conversation today just actually touching on a little bit of what Jennifer and I were just talking about right there. Super important topic. There was a guy named Dr. Weston A. Price in the early 1900s who was a dentist, and he went out and he was studying these indigenous tribes. Now, what he was trying to do was prove that indigenous people that, were still living off the land and true natives, they didn't have like real access to Western society. He was trying to prove that humans should be vegans, basically, okay? And what he actually found was the exact opposite. He was trying to prove that the reason people had such messed up jaws in his practice was because, again, we're supposed to be vegans. And what he found is that out of all the tribes he studied, I think it was about 14, every single one ate raw animal products. Every single one except one ate raw organ meats, intestines, brain, liver, heart, those types of things. And the one that didn't, they still ate raw dairy, and they lived very close to the equator, which is relevant, but it's a separate topic for another time, why that matters and why that would have happened. So just to be really clear here, because I know when we're in the health space, I feel like veganism and vegetarianism is something that comes up so often. I personally, and I know so many practitioners, that when you are eating really healthy meats and organ meats, it just doesn't seem... Veganism and vegetarianism, as much as I'd love to believe in them, they just don't seem to lead to as good as health outcomes as these meat-based diets do. So certainly not trying to get dogmatic here by any means. I always would tell anyone to do what they think is best for them. But it was really tough for me as someone who was a vegetarian and really wanted to do that, my body not only subjectively does better on meat, it objectively does better on meat on the lab tests. So I will leave it at that for today. We don't need to be going into that too much more in depth, but I wanted to not leave everyone on a cliffhanger. I think that's a really interesting piece of information too. Definitely check out Weston A. Price Foundation and his work. But as always, I just wanted to thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the FDN Thrive podcast. As always, I'm your host, Evan Transu, aka Health Coach Ev, and we've been talking to a very special person from FDN, Jennifer Woodward. We will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the FDN Thrive podcast. If you feel like you've been stuck in the cycle of trial and error when it comes to your health issues, our team can help. Whether you've tried every different diet out there without lasting success, spent way too much money on supplements at your local health food store, or been told that your lab tests are normal despite feeling anything but normal, we have your back. Go to FDNthrive.com and click the Get Started Here button if you're ready to stop playing guessing games with your health. That's FDNthrive.com.